Oh, the time for justice, the time for freedom, and the time for equality is always right now.
You're listening to another Perspective Talk Show.
Hello. This is Sam, a.k.a. Lucy Bones.
This show is brought to you by Rebirth Radio.
Something said, something done. Within the community, feeds into the stereotype, feeds into the prejudice.
Shadow.
I think more community involvement could be beneficial in teaching people about budgeting, income, and how to save, and multiple streams of income. And
you're listening to another Perspective Talk Show.
Hey, this is Lucy Bones, a.k.a. Sam. I am going to be joined today by my co-host, Simone Higginbottom of Rebirth Radio, and we have a wonderful guest. Justice of the Peace, Tracy Baptiste Woodard. Tracy, good morning. What would you prefer me to call you, ma'am?
You can call me Tracy.
Okay, wonderful. Simone, are you with us?
Yes, I am. Good morning. I'm here.
Good morning. We have a lot of things to talk about. And, Tracy, you are such an inspiration. I was reading about your bio, and I was listening to Simone, and I did a little Google search, and I found such wonderful, inspirational things about you. So I understand that currently you are the appointed Justice of the Peace because you ran unopposed. So how does that work down there in your parish? So you put in for the elected seat.
Yes, ma'am. I qualified for the seat, and I was unopposed, so I became the Justice of the Peace elect at the time because at the present time, I was in the Justice of the Peace Constable seat. So I finished that term on December 31st, and I became the Justice of the Peace on January 1st of 2021.
Well, I want to congratulate you because that is a beautiful and wonderful thing.
Yes, ma'am.
Let me kind of jump in there and say this. Like I was telling when we were talking about people that we wanted to get involved with this podcast, with this show. We wanted to bring people. First of all, we wanted real people that was relatable. So I know Tracy personally, and she's going to be a little. She's a person that's always in the background, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have her on, because she's a person in the background. She doesn't have to be out front. She's not a photo opt politician. She's happy being in the background, organization, being the one that, makes sure that everything happens and it happens the right way. So, she couldn't, I think if she had someone that ran against her, I don't think she would have been anything but victorious, because she is real and she's relatable. And that's one of the things that I love about it. But one of my questions earlier, right prior before we went on, and you asked me to join you today, one of my things I wanted to kind of put out there were there's a lady that, we lost her last year. And that's the Reverend Claiborne. She's a civil rights leader here in this city, in this state. And she has a lot to do with Tracy. She mentored Tracy. And I think she was on her way of trying to get me out in that water, but I don't think that I'm not built for political life. But Tracy's built for it because she is even killed. She's not, she's not going to, I want to say neutral. She can work with anybody. And see, that's what it takes. You have to be able to work with anybody, regardless of party affiliation or whatever their social, economic, their culture, their race. But one of the things I'd like to ask Tracy, what do you think you have taken when you have the opportunity to be mentored by someone that was a civil rights legend here for us? to mentor you and get you to be who you are? What part did she play? And the reason why I'm asking it, because I want our listeners to understand how important it is to have the right to be mentored in the right way by the right person.
Yes. First off, it was an inspiration. Just like you stated, she passed on last year, and my nickname for her was Mother or Mama, because she was not only a mentor, she was a mother to me. She nurtured me in the times when I needed nurtured. She pushed me in the times where I needed to be pushed. She helped me to get an understanding and gain knowledge and wisdom. In all of that, she made sure that I did it the right way. She taught me a great deal when it came to just not in this city, but this parish and this state, how to conduct myself and how to help others, And she's greatly missed, but her strategies, her love, and her prayers are continually moving on as we speak now. And I really, really, really appreciate her and love her dearly. And by this being the last day of Black History Month, this is truly, truly, truly a moment. It is. And that she really helped me, Simone. And I appreciate you by bringing her up, yes.
Yes. I think about her daily myself, so I know she played a big part in you being who you are. Can you tell our listeners and also share with us your role as Justice of the Peace and what kind of impact that role has on the community?
Okay, yes. A Justice of the Peace is a lower-tier judge. The court is designed to handle minor disputes and rules of evidence that are relaxed. The filing fees are less than the city courts and the district courts here in the parish. The Justice of the Peace courts exist for the convenience of the citizens, which hopefully gives them their day in court much quicker and with less expense. Legitimate who come before the court do not necessarily need attorneys. Lack of attorneys means the JOP has to be ever mindful to protect the rights of all who come before us, The jurisdiction of the court is only $5,000. The court is limited in the kind of cases that has to be heard. No family or juvenile or succession, jury trials, or real estate title cases are brought to the court. The most common cases are the eviction cases.
Okay. I'm glad she brought that up, Lucy, because we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I'm quite sure that you've had many individuals to come before you with eviction cases.
Yeah.
And I know that has a kind of like a heart-wrenching, because emotionally you're feeling for the individuals that are coming before you, but you also have to be mindful. A lot of times people use what's going on. I'm going to say this, and I don't want to be, crucified for it, but during times like this, and that's with every situation, some people take advantage of what's going on to use that in their favor. And in saying that, I know we are under, I don't know if we still are. I know at one time we were under an eviction moratorium due to the pandemic. Is that something that's still across a federal, let me say that, not state, but federal eviction moratorium? Are we still under that? What does that look like?
I'm glad you brought that up, Ms. Simone. The public opinion is no place for the court cases, but the cases must be decided on the facts, and personal feelings must be left at the door. Each person is entitled to an impartial hearing. A very pertinent current issue is the CDC order, which it provided COVID impacted individuals from being evicted for non-payment of rent. But all other violations may result in eviction. Expiration of the lease can result in eviction as well. Tenants misread this order or did not read it at all. The order requires, among other things, to send the landlord a declaration that COVID has impacted his revenue stream such that the tenant cannot pay his full rent. The tenant must try to reach a lesser amount of rent to pay. and all past due rent, late charges, fees, and costs are due at the end of the order. And they extended the order to March 31st, but I think they've extended it again. I haven't checked yet when did they extend it, but I know for sure to March 31st. And the CDC order is not a blanket prohibiting of eviction process. You know, communicate with your landlord. I cannot stress that enough. Many evictions are filed because the tenant stops communicating.
My goodness. And that goes back to not understanding what's going on here. I think everybody just heard moratorium, and they never took the time to read it and find out the information.
Exactly.
It automatically
was saying no evictions, exactly, and they didn't research the document to see and understand because it's a thick packet, and it will discourage someone to pick it up. It's a thick packet.
You know, and I have to say, there's a lot of people who believe that they cannot be evicted at all, like this order, this eviction moratorium, they can't be evicted at all because of COVID. And I'm so glad that you pointed out to our listeners that if you're doing things that break the contract you signed when you signed your lease, you can still be evicted. That the eviction moratorium only covers the financial hardship of COVID and being able to pay your rent as a result.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's, you know, again, I guess I'm going to elaborate on that. And when you say things that are in your lease, like if you have a pet and you're not supposed to have a pet, they can evict you. If you've gone in there and you caused damages to their properties, they can evict you. It only covers the financial part of it, but if you do something else outside of the financial part of that, then you're evicted. They don't understand that. So a lot of that, I think, is going on, and that's one of the big reasons why I thought of Justice of the Peace Woodard to come on, is because I want people to understand what a Justice of the Peace is. You know, a lot of people think a Justice of the Peace just marries people. They don't realize that there's so many other things that could be handled through that office. You know, and I was one of those who thought that until I became a little bit more educated about what the Justice of the Peace does. I automatically, you know, you see it on TV. What you see the Justice of the Peace doing? Go to the Justice of the Peace. We're going to get married at the Justice of the Peace. We never say anything else about that particular office.
Yeah.
You know, and that makes me think of something too, Simone and Justice Woodard. I want to know, are there any kind of things any kind of decisions where you've had to dissent from public opinion, or any kind of ruling that the community might have engaged in any kind of questioning or backlash because of not only your community service role, but because of your public role as well?
When I'm in that position, public opinion has no place. I have to leave the emotions at the door.
How hard has it been to leave some opinions at the door? Because I know there are sometimes, in certain circumstances, you really have strong thoughts about something. So how hard can it be to have this role, respect the role, but also leave those intense thoughts and opinions aside?
First off, it can be difficult, but I have to stick in the lawful manner, and I have to make sure that both parties, the laws are being pushed, and that it's balanced off, and it's a right and a wrong, and I have to stick with the law. I have to go to the law. I have to refer to the law. Now, in some instances, the courts do have other resources, and if either party is in need of those resources, they are granted to them. So that's where my stance is on that. You know, it's different. Each case is different. I don't look at each case as the same. You know, I read through the cases prior to the court proceedings, whatever was presented prior to with the application for filing for the eviction. I read through it thoroughly, and I reference with the law, and also with the safety and the environment of both parties.
Okay, I was going to ask, speaking of safety, have you seen an increase in VAWA cases? And VAWA is for the battered women to be able to terminate their leases on the grounds that they are no longer safe where they are living. Do you see an increase in that because of COVID?
Yes, ma'am. I've seen an increase in the past year as being a constable. I saw that from the constable's position because the constable works more physically with tenants and landlords than the justice of the peace. So yet last year, yes, I did see those, and by me being in that position, I was able to contact certain organizations to help because the safety was involved with, with the family, dealing with the children and the parents. Yes, I've had those cases in the past. Yes, ma'am. And it did increase with COVID. The stressors, yes, ma'am, and the triggers, yes, ma'am.
My question was when you were speaking about with the law being able to, and we all know that sometimes law, the way it may be currently written, particular laws, ordinances, and so on and so forth, they do not sometimes. I always like to say they expire. They don't change with the times because times change, situations change. The way things should be done should be changed. Is there any leeway in there? I don't want to say loophole, but I guess I have to say loophole. Loophole in there sometimes when a situation doesn't quite fit an ordinance or a law. Is there some wiggle room in there for you?
Yes, and when I do take counsel when it comes to a case with that significance, I have a counsel that I take. I do have an ad hoc. And I do refer to higher court judges, and we do take counsel when involving things like that. And now I wouldn't necessarily, well, you can say, like you said, loopholes, but there are certain things in the laws. For instance, I do know the present mayor of East Baton Rouge Parish years ago established laws because she was a senator and a representative prior to being mayor, established laws with the domestic violence. And I want to say it was about 8 years ago. And I have to refer back to those laws. And since then, in the last couple of years, we've established more laws dealing with the domestic violence and the increase with certain things and issues with the institution of family. Yeah. Okay.
So you find yourself, correct me if I'm wrong, we do have a domestic violence court here.
Yeah, they have a domestic violence, they have a division that handles those cases in the city parish, which is the district court, and in the city, which is the city court, and also the Justice of Peace courts refer those cases to the district court.
Gotcha. So you always you have the ability to refer cases like that to another court. Okay.
Yeah, we have the ability not only to refer or also recuse ourselves from cases. We do.
Okay. Well, my next thing is I want to kind of shift from your position and your court. I guess kind of goes back to how you got to be who you are and where you are. Can you tell me and the listeners and Lucy a little bit about your family's history of serving in the community? When did it start and how?
Well, Simone, I want to press pause for a moment because I really want to draw attention for our listeners before we wrap up that portion. The ethics and the ethics and the deliberations and the due considerations that the people who are charged with making these challenging decisions and challenging times of our lives, you just heard Justice of the Peace Tracy Batiste Woodard elaborate on the challenges, the difficulties, the ethics, and the different grounds that she has to use to make her decisions. This is not an easy role, and people in her position do not take these decisions in these challenging times lightly. And Simone, you can go forward. I just wanted to make sure our listeners understood completely the gravity of the role.
Yes. So, Tracy, would you like to elaborate on your family's history? I know your family's history, especially in the little community that's a little bit north. It's a very extreme northern portion of the parish called Austin, Louisiana. And could you kind of tell me a little bit about, I know, so if you could tell the listeners about that family's history in serving the community, when did it start and how did it start?
Well, my family arrived. Well, I'm a native of Alton, Louisiana. That's between Baker. It's up by Baker and Zachary, Louisiana, in East Baton Rouge Parish. And we're a small community. We was composed at the beginning with 2 streets, and now we've expanded to 2 streets and 2 subdivisions. And I grew up in that neighborhood. We're a rural community. We lived off the land. We're still loving each other, love our neighbors, just like we are a biological family. And that's where I grew up in. But my family came to the Alton community in the late 1930s, and we lived off the land. From what I get, Simone just knows the portion of my parents. My parents owned the first, you could say, daycare in the community, and that daycare allowed the community to establish jobs for the people in the community and the children to get educated in early childhood development. And also my grandparents were leaders in the community. My grandfather was a servant in the community. He gave transportation, gave rides to people out of the community into the city to, pay their bills, make grocery. So that we've been a part of Alton community since the late 1930s. Yes.
Wow.
My goodness. Look, I had a smile on my face, and I know Lucy's got that look. Lucy's in Minnesota. So I know she kind of what you heard when you said make groceries. We always get that because we're in the South and we say make groceries.
Yes,
that means we're going grocery. We're not making it. We're going grocery shopping. Yes. And I know our listeners are going to be like, wow, how do they make groceries? That's a Southern thing. But I'm going to say it's a Louisiana thing because I went other places in the South and nobody else says that. But that's what that means, listeners, grocery shopping. We're not literally making groceries. That's just a little joke. I thought it was kind of funny when you said that. I said, now they're going to wonder what in the world she's talking about. But
I'm from Louisiana, native of Alton, Louisiana. Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
We make groceries. That's what we do.
That's right.
You can move the person, but you can't take the country out of them. Exactly. Yes.
Exactly. Yes. So I love that. But my mother and your mother were friends, and it is I can remember your mom with that daycare, and like you said, it established an opportunity for mothers to have the ability to be able to leave outside the home. In such a small area, there was nothing there before your mom opened that daycare, and it allowed a lot of mothers to get out, go back to school, to go and have jobs, careers, and things like that. So at the end of that doing that, the result was that community began to grow and prosper. And another thing I want to point out in that community, Lucy, is that their family, they live in that community. They placed a landfill in that community. And when I say a community that came together and fought, that her family spearheaded. It was one of the spearheading families that came out and fought against that landfill in that community that a lot of people began to get sick and ill from it. Share with us of that journey and for the Alton community and your family and how they worked to get that. Yes.
Exactly. That's one of the components that my parents have an environmental justice organization. And it started with my cousin who just passed back in January. She had a rare disease. Only 2 people in the world, she was one, somebody else had the disease in the world has had this disease, and she almost died. And it was due to the environmental issues that the Alton community had. But we're still moving forward. We're still together. And we not only have that landfill, but Alton is surrounded by 3 Superfund sites as well. So we have been discriminated towards dealing with our environment. Yes, and by our environment being discriminated against, it has affected our economics and our development there. Yes. We started off with a school. We started off with thriving businesses there, and now we only have our fire station and our recreational center there.
We've seen this in the north, in Detroit as well. Detroit was a booming town. A lot of people of color worked there, founded the town really with their hard labor and invested in properties and in the communities. And again, Detroit is a perfect example of what is reflected in your town too. I mean, people come in and they put chemical plants in Flint, Michigan, for example, their water supply. There is a lack of care and concern in the environment in communities where there's poverty or communities of color or anything that the general populace or certain individuals don't care about or isn't as important to.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah. And that community has been affected with the environmental issues since it started because I did research on it as an undergrad student. And I found a lot of things. It started back in the 1950s, actually, before the environmental racism came up. The environmental racism came up in the late 1970s, with Mr. Robert Bullock when he started publishing different books concerning that. And what I found is that happened a lot of rural communities or communities that is established close to a main river, which Alston is established close to the Mississippi River. And right from Alston on south with the river, you have other communities that has been affected as well. And it's called Cancer Alley, actually. We're in Cancer Alley.
Wow.
If you Google Cancer Alley, yes, ma'am, it's called Cancer Alley. And those are factual things that I did as a undergrad student in history. Yes, ma'am.
So you've done a lot of foundational work in the community. Are there still things you hope to achieve in the community and things you hope to change and progress, and what are they?
Well, prayerfully, as my parents continue to move with the organization, not just things that I hope, but things that the community prayerfully, and by me being a part of that community, we plan to move forward by helping our community with the health, the environment, sitting at the table, coming and sitting at the table with others and with other agencies and government. Hopefully we can come to a resolution, because we've been affected with our water, our soil, our air. It surrounds us.
I had a previous guest who made a statement that grants written by people of color living in the communities of color should be proposed to the government, and communities should be granted funds versus programs. And because of your role in the community and the services that you do, I'm wondering where does this sit with you, this statement of granting communities funding to be able to lift themselves up and determine the way the funds are spent within the community to help folks versus programs?
I'm open to, and it's personal, I'm open to anything that the community would benefit off of, and if the community benefits off of it, that means the institution of family will benefit, and if that means the institution of family benefits, that means that individual benefits. And if everyone benefits, this world would be a better place, but I've sat at the table and listened to arguments, because I do know that the government, the federal government, was trying to establish a bill or something that would help with what we're going through with the CDC moratorium. And that was a question. Some want it to go to certain organizations, and then some want it to go to the government, so they can, the local government and the state government, so they can issue the monies out. And me personally, it's whatever makes our community.
What type of things should be in place? Because government also sometimes, just like individual organizations, don't always do what is needed or follow through with what's needed for these for individuals, for the community to get these services. My first problem is this. You may be familiar with this. I'm going to give you a prime example of what I think of an organization that has been given the funding to assist people with their with rental assistance right here in Baton Rouge. And that's UREC.
Mm-hmm.
UREC back right before the holidays announced that they were accepting applications for people to get assistance with their rental, their rent, back rent. So the last time there, at the beginning of the year, there, people were calling in and saying that, they had applied, they hadn't heard anything, they were on the brink of being evicted, what was happening with this organization. So the director, they interviewed him, the newspaper here, The Advocate. I can't quote it verbatim, but what he stated was is that they had accepted over 30,000 applications. And in so many words, he was saying that they didn't have the staff to vet these applications. So this is my question. When monies were given to this organization, one of the things that I would have kept in mind, of course, we're going to have an overflow of applicants. Those organizations that apply for these funds should have the abilities, other capabilities of getting individuals in to vet these applications. In other words, they're overwhelmed. So, and by them being overwhelmed, then the individuals, the families and individuals in the community are at risk of becoming homeless individuals. So, it should not take, we're going into the third month of the year, and that was like back in October. So 5 months later, people are still waiting. So what can be placed in, put in place for these organizations, and even if it's the government or the city's East Baton Rouge Parish Social Services Department, they are a little, I think they're a little bit, they have, like I said, they have a bigger staff, so they're able to do that. So that kind of puts me against leaning towards the city being able to have these monies to do things, because first of all, they already have the staff in place to do this. When these small organizations, these nonprofits, take on these funds, they don't have the ability to serve large people during the time of something like a pandemic. So what do you think can be put in place when they're giving these funds to the nonprofits to make sure that they are equipped to provide these services and to be able to vet out the applicants for these different monies and fundings and programs and things like that?
My response to that, Simone, is, when it comes to government and when it comes to law, both are established and should be functioning as to on a perspective of responsibility and accountability. And I feel as though for everything to balance off and not have as many errors, because, with anything you have to have risk management. I feel as though the government and these organizations should be held accountable and responsible on a national level, on a state level, and a local level. Because if you have it, if it's in an order as that, you can always fix those little niches within that order. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, and that's what I think. I think both parties should play a part, the government and the organizations, and both should be held accountable and responsible.
And I think that,
because we are taxpayers. We're citizens. We're taxpayers.
Exactly.
Everyone is a taxpayer. Even if they draw some type of unemployment or Social Security, you still, if you're drawing that, you are a taxpayer. When you're out shopping for groceries, I'm going to say shop instead of making groceries. when we're out shopping, for groceries about our daily agenda, we are paying taxes when we're purchasing groceries. When we're purchasing gas. We are a part of the community, and we are a part of this government, and we're a part of this nation. So everyone should be held accountable.
Speaking of that, I would like you to help elaborate to our listeners, especially our young listeners and those who maybe feel like they have no impact on the community. What is important about getting involved and serving the community? What is important about doing this critical thing?
Yeah, okay. This is what I have for the youth and the young minds as well. We are and they are the change. And we're a part of society. Just as seasons change from winter, spring, summer, and fall, so will we. And we have to move forward being knowledgeable and positive by furthering our education, our craft, and our lives by being happy in this world. That's my statement towards that. You know, we have to continue to grow. We have to continue to learn. I don't care if we're 70 or 80 years old, but I want the young minds to know that it's not an end point. We have to continue. As we grow older, we have to gain more knowledge and wisdom and stay positive. That's my thing, because we're going to have little nicks, we're going to have little things, we're going to have little trials that come before us, but we have to stay positive, and we have to move farther, and we have to live, and we have to live together. We have to help each other, regardless. But we also have to know our limits and our capabilities at the present time. So that's
what do you
my
think
response to that.
What do you think is the best way to introduce the concept of community to our young people?
It starts at home, and if it's a problem at home, that's why we have certain resources. That's why we have our neighbors. That's why we established a family. We should seek counsel when there's certain things that we don't understand. And the knowledge and wisdom is out there. It's out there. And we have to continue to be prayerfully and move through positive energy. Continue with, faith and understanding. That's what I have to tell the young people. Stay positive. Stay positive. Get educated. Further your education. There is no end point. It's a continue, move forward.
You and I both have, well, I don't know. Yeah, we both have millennials. So, and with the millennials, and you and I are part of what they call Generation X. We are the children of baby boomers, you and I. But we see that how the generations have changed the way that they do things, how they embrace the community. I'm going to say this. It started with our parents. I think they were like the beginning of community service, community commitment, working in the community, creating organizations, and especially with, like, this is the last day of Black History Month. So being African American women, find that this is the point I want to bring as far as the youth and children, and I've seen an explosion of prior to now. We basically saw women out in the community, really the ones that were out with the organizations, out with the youth. And I think that, somewhere along the way during that period of time, there were changes in the African-American home. The male had started to disappear from the home. And then it fell upon the women that had to step out into the communities, into the schools, volunteering. So now I'm seeing in the last maybe 5 to 6, maybe even 10 years, an explosion of male participation with our young people in our communities. And I'm so glad to see that. And I'm seeing that also with the millennials. The male millennials are being letting their voices be heard in their communities. Yes. They are letting this is what we need. These are the resources that we need. And, we can't no longer wait on an organization or the government or whoever to give it to us. We have to work at getting it for ourselves. So I have noticed that. Do you concur with what I'm saying about this explosion of African American male participation in the community as of now, compared to maybe 20 years ago, 25 years ago? Do you see that as I see it?
Yes, I do. These last couple of years, yes. And I think it is so wonderful. And you just brought to my attention my staff. I'm the only female in my staff. So yes, and look, it's wonderful. It is so wonderful because the males are dominant. So, and looking at the composure and the infrastructure of the office, I am the only female, but they play a crucial part in the court, and I am so thankful for my staff, from my ad hoc down to my deputy constables. Everyone,
and that's
are male. Yeah.
And I love that. I love to see that it uplifts the community. It uplifts our youth, especially our young men, to see that men are taking on positions in the community as they did maybe 50, 60, maybe 70 years ago. We're beginning to see that again. And I think that's a good thing to propel our young people, especially our young males, to get involved. And I think if they get involved, then they, we had a guest last week, Mr. James Whitfield, who has a nonprofit that helps assist with individuals who have been incarcerated and with reentry into our communities. And, I'm seeing that maybe will keep them from having to use his services, is what I'm saying. If you become a part of something that's bigger than you are, then you have a tendency to do better. That's one of the things we have to get our young people more involved. But I'm so happy to see these millennials to voice their voices and they're letting themselves be heard. And we haven't saw that in such a long time. I saw so many out during election time, but I cannot take that away from our African American women, because another thing with them, to me, the last 2 years have been the years of African American women. We have gotten more African American mayors. You've set a precedent yourself with being the first African American female in your position, and African American judges, and not just politically, but in the business world. It's been an explosion of that, and I think that we now, some of us, have come to the point to where we realize we have to do something. We can't just no longer talk about it. We got to be about it.
Exactly. And I agree with you, Simone, because the different community meetings that I attend, it's a lot of African American male presence. In the last 2 or 3 years, a lot.
Exactly.
From I can remember going, component. From the educational component, from the legal component, from the economical component. We have an increase. Have you noticed we have an increase of male real estate agents and brokers? It has been, even teaching. We're starting to get an influx of male
you're right. Starting to see more male educators.
Now.
Exactly.
Even in government. Exactly.
Even in government, we are beginning to, and I'm gonna say this: they're getting younger.
Yes,
they're getting younger. They're not. Yeah, they're getting younger. Yeah. Because in Iberville Parish, we have a 22 or 21-year-old councilman. Yeah.
Even in Lafayette Parish, we have a is he 21 or 19, something like that?
Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
We have young.
Wow.
Yeah, they're getting younger. Yeah. That's another thing. They're not, they're at a young age, and they're active in their communities, and I see that that's such a great thing. But I think that goes, that goes back to individuals like yourself. You are showing great leadership. Not, you and other women and other men in the communities are showing that it can be done. You don't have to sit back and be quiet and wait for it to happen. It can be done. So you are you're mentoring in the community. You mentor my daughter. You mentor other young ladies and young men in the community, so that individuals like you are just not. You're just not holding office to be holding that seat. You're not in a lot, and and it's true. And no matter how you try to look around or look over it around it, there are some people that are in political positions that are not serving the community; they're serving themselves. So you are what I call a true community servant. Because, and now I'm gonna tell you this, Lucy. She's at the community meeting. She's not the one that's out there. Rah, 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 with all the trying to overtalk everybody and trying to get their point across. You won't even know she's in the room. If you didn't see her, you wouldn't know she was in the room. But you guarantee this, she got that notebook, she's taking notes.
Oh, my goodness.
And planting seeds.
She's not a talker to get out there and just talk and want to be heard or photo ops and this. You're not going to see a lot of that from Justice Woodard. But once she
leading
leaves
by
that meeting,
example is important.
exactly. You don't have to be always the loudest, whatever. You know what they say about the one with the loudest, makes the loudest, whatever noise is the emptiest wagon or whatever. So she's not that type. So I witnessed her. She's taking notes. She's taking names, and she's finding out who can do what or what needs to be done. That's the first thing when she calls me. What needs to be done? How can I help you? It's never about how this is going to help me.
Right. Well, Simone,
so that's to me. That's a community servant. That's a community servant.
Yes, yes. And now we're coming towards the end of our show, and I want to thank you both again for being here, having these conversations. I am deeply educated. I feel honored to have been able to be a part of this conversation. I have learned so much. I have been inspired. Hope has been restored in my heart, and my cup filleth over right now. But I want to take this time for Justice Batiste Woodard. I want you to leave any closing thoughts, any closing remarks you'd like to leave upon our listeners before we end today's interview.
Yes, ma'am. First off, I want to thank you, and I want to thank Rebirth Magazine and Communications and their staff, especially Miss Simone Higginbottom, and also the listening audience for tuning in today. And also, God bless, be safe, and thank you again.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you so much for appearing on our show. Simone, thank you for co-hosting.
Not a problem.
Well, Simone, we had a very engaging and enlightening conversation with Justice Batiste Woodard. What are your thoughts?
Oh, my goodness. It was an excellent opportunity to share an individual who comes from, I call, community service royalty, to be able to share what she does. A lot of people don't understand what the Justice of the Peace does besides marrying people. So we had an opportunity to learn about the office, what they do, how they do it, and how she feels that we should be serving our community.
I agree. This was very enlightening for me. We don't really have Justice of the Peaces up here. We have magistrates and referees and judges. So this was very, very interesting, and to see the different roles and the processes. Legal representatives have a bad rap in society. People think, oh, they're just out to get me, when really there's a very fine line they have to walk, and she really elaborated quite well the ethics, the responsibility, the opinions have to go, her personal thoughts on the matter have to go, and she really has to stick with the letter of the law and the ethics of the matter.
Exactly. And I know that has to be hard, and it takes a special person to do that, to be able to walk in, leave your personal feelings on the other side of the door, and go with the law to the letter. And also, she said to us this, that sometimes, like I said, I mentioned loopholes, but there are ways that, she can seek counsel when she finds that something that she has a situation that doesn't fit the law, doesn't fit the ordinance. So she also, it's not just on her. She has a leeway where she can go to a higher court, and she has to get, other resources to assist. So that is good to know that all the time, sometimes we have situations where it doesn't quite fit what we need to get done, but there's always a way to get it done. So I'm excited about that. I'm just happy to have her here on this last day of Black History Month.
I am too. It's history in the making. I mean, we are witness to so much history during this time, especially COVID and all of the community events surrounding the Black community, all of the rising superstars who are rising to different positions that no one has ever held before. I mean, this is amazing to witness. Not only that, but wow, this justice, oof, I am just so blown away. I mean, I was speechless for a moment. I had no words, and I talk a lot.
Oh, my goodness. Look, it takes me back when I think about the time of up in New York, the Harlem Renaissance, and this is just something that's nationally in this country. Mm-hmm. We are living in a renaissance of the African-American woman, the African-American youth, the African-American man. This is a renaissance. It is a rebirth of us collectively getting involved with our community. We are no longer afraid to hold political positions. We're no longer afraid to be educators. And we're coming back at one time in our community. I don't know about any outside of our community, but all we saw were male educators, male teachers, and they almost became extinct. She brought that point up during her interview. They almost have become extinct, seeing an African-American man in the classroom. We're beginning to see that again, and I think that'll make the difference with our young African-American males.
Having solid examples of what community living can be.
Exactly.
Yeah. So what are your closing thoughts and reflections on this?
My closing thoughts today would be on this last day of Black History Month, and we're getting ready to head into Women's History Month in March, starting on tomorrow, is that we continue to embrace ourselves, our families, and our communities, and to continue to uplift each other and to push each other to a better way of life where we all can live together here in this country, in my state, my city, globally. This pandemic is still out there, it's still going on, but in an instance, we know this morning that there are people that are striving for a better life for our communities. With the example of this morning, Justice of the Peace, Tracy Woodard. She is a phenomenal woman.
You know, I have to agree, and I learned so much about environmental racism as well. You know, my closing reflection is this: history is alive. We are living in times where people like Justice Batiste Woodard can still be firsts in their community and in the world. Inspiration gives way to hope and a future that you can build and shape by your actions in the community. Institution of family is something that we heard. It was a common theme in this interview and seemed to encompass generational benefit. Everything we talked about, financially, politically, funding sources, programming, as long as it benefited the institution of family, which encompasses generations of individuals, then it was a good thing. Then it was something that she could get behind. And I think, you know, it takes me back to this phrase, intent does not negate impact. Because when you think about impact only, impact of your thoughts, your words, and your actions, when you think about the impact first, only then can we reside in justice. The impact on community related to institution of family and benefit to the institution of family is critical. Step out, step up, be a part of community. Don't simply exist in it. Don't simply, I live here, but I keep my head down. I don't speak up. I don't advocate. I don't reach out to my neighbor. I don't help my neighbor. I don't greet my neighbor. Sometimes even just saying hello is being involved. Help shape it by participating. Be a part of something bigger than yourselves, because you exist in something bigger than yourself. This has been Another Perspective. Thank you, and love one another.
You're listening to Another Perspective talk show.
Shadow.
This show is brought to you by Rebirth Radio.